do Jews believe in reincarnation? That is our discussion for tonight. Got it. So, do Jews believe in reincarnation? We are focusing on the Jewish concept of reincarnation. Now, the concept of reincarnation, as we believe it, comes from Judaism. However, it may not shock you when I say that we have a very different understanding of reincarnation to the way other people understand it. So that's my introduction. Do Jews believe in introduction? Well, yes and no. Good evening, Joe. And that rhymed. So we certainly have a concept of reincarnation in Judaism, but it certainly is not the way other religions or other people believe in it. So yes and no. That's the first thing. I suppose most people, when they think of reincarnation, they think of things like a soul coming back on and on. We discussed this last week partially when we spoke about karma. But karma is a specifically Hindu or Buddhist concept. When we spoke about karma, we spoke about one version of one understanding where souls are constantly going back into bodies, leaving bodies, dying, and then returning to the next body. Judaism doesn't believe that, really. And let me explain to you the simple reason why. We have a fundamental belief, actually not only a fundamental belief, but one of the principles of our faith is the concept of the resurrection of the dead. I'm sure many of you have heard of Tchiyat HaMesim, the resurrection of the dead. Now, Rambam, Maimonides, actually qualifies resurrection as the dead, which is a discussion for another time, perhaps next week or perhaps another week, a discussion for what the resurrection actually is. But the basic understanding is that at some point our souls will re-enter our bodies. Now, what happens if we believed in reincarnation happening, that a person went from one body to the next body, to the next body, and to the next body? When it comes to resurrection, what are you going to do? You're going to be it's going to be a bit problematic, if you understand what I'm saying. It's going to be quite a problem. So how's that person, one person, going to reincarnate into 10 different bodies? Or if you're Hindu and you believe in constant reincarnation, it may be 100 new bodies or 1,000 new bodies for however long you believe you've been doing it. So you may have a bit of an issue. For that reason, we know that reincarnation is not simply souls returning to bodies as they go along. And resurrection is definitely true according to Judaism. It's not only just definitely true, it's a fundamental principle within Jewish faith. So that's the first point. It's not reincarnation as understood by many other cultures. So what is reincarnation and how do we understand it? We understand that it's not something that necessarily happens to our bodies. It's something that occurs with our souls. So in order to understand the concept of reincarnation, I'm going to have to visit my favorite topic, and that is discussing what a soul is, which I've discussed in many other classes before. But we always have to revisit the soul, because the soul is, if you don't understand and don't remember what the soul is, you're really going to struggle to understand anything that occurs to the soul. Because when we talk about souls, and then we just talk about this thing, and you're like, okay, so that thing goes through some type of adventure. Some type of thing happens to those souls. What is that type of thing that happens to that soul? So therefore, if we want to talk about reincarnation, I assume we would all understand that reincarnation is something that occurs to a soul. We need to understand what a soul is. So apologies if this is a repetitive concept for you, but it's certainly the most fundamental concept. Evening, Sam, good to have you.
Hi.
What is that concept of reincarnation? Okay, so the concept of a soul is as follows. A soul is, you guessed it, that is you. You are a soul. You are simply just a soul and nothing more than a soul. You, as in when you talk about and you refer to yourself, you're referring to your soul. That's who you, when you think of yourself, you are a soul. It happens to be that you live in your body. Okay, finished. That's the end. Nothing else to add. That's basically it. The long description is over. Now, of course, there's a lot more to add to that, because some of you are thinking, what am I talking about? I hope. The answer is as simple as I said. You see, some people think, perhaps mistakenly, that they are a body. They think that they're a body. Good evening, Elliot. But the truth is, they're not a body. If you were a body, you would be just like everybody else, like every other creature. You're just, well, there's no difference between you and a plant. There's no difference between you and a piece of grass or an animal. But as Jews and as human beings, we know that there is a massive and major difference between humans and animals and plants and inanimate objects like stones and water, etc. The difference between a soul and a body is that the body is really just a physical concept. It's a physical, it is literally just DNA that hosts you. You live over there, but you existed beforehand and you will continue to live. Your thoughts, your feelings, your whole personality is what makes up who you are. That is not physical. That lives on beyond your existence. So with that in mind, when you think of a soul, you think of the true you. What happens when you enter the body? Your soul becomes limited to physical existence. All it could now see is its physical world. It could only recognize and understand physicality. But before it entered the soul, before the soul entered the body, it was able to understand spiritual ideas, things which are not limited by time and space, because the definition of physicality are things that are finite and limited by time and space. And therefore, while you are in a body, you will feel only physical things, or as in tangible things are the only things that you can properly, tangibly touch. And you could see only physical things, and you could hear only things that are physical things. However, your feelings and your ideas can be that of spirituality, of something spiritual, something which is not the physical, because that is coming from your soul. Those ideas, those memories, they are not physical. They live on with you for all time. You, as in you, exactly who you define yourself as right now, that individual lives on with all the memories that you have. The only thing that you're going to lose is going to lose an element of your soul, which is there just to give life to your body. That's what does not. So that's called, and sometimes it's called the nefesh hachiyunis, which is the vital soul, or the nefesh habahamis, the animal soul. That does not need to remain once a person is no longer living in a body. So, how do we get into reincarnation? So that's my explanation of souls for you. Souls, I'll give you one extra story, which I've said before, just to maybe make it a bit clearer. The Alter Rebbe was once, you know what, I've got a different story. This is souls. This story is a bit better. Reb Elimelech, Reb Zusha of Anapoli, who was actually a colleague and a very close friend of the Alter Rebbe, who lived approximately 200 years ago, a great rabbi, a great scholar, and a very pious and holy man. He was once walking up and down, up and down, up and down, back and forth, back and forth. And as he's walking, he says, Vu is Zusha, Vu is Zusha, Vu is Zusha. And he's like in deep contemplation saying, Vu is Zusha. Vu is Zusha in Yiddish means, where is Zusha? His name was Zusha of Anapoli. And he's like talking to himself and say, where am I? Where am I? Where am I? And it was like he was like in a trance. and he's had a bunch of students that were like watching him in total, in total confusion. What is going on? What, has he lost his mind? Does he not know where he is? Why is he talking like this? I think maybe we've got to take him to a special type of place that take care of these type of people. They're not exactly sure who they are. Actually, he was more sure than who he was than many of the other people around him. And eventually, after several hours, he stopped. And then his students approached him and said, Rebbe, what is going on? Why are you walking up and down, trying to say, asking who you are? He says, let me explain. You see, I just realized something. When people now refer to me as this person, this individual living in this body, that's in this body, but then when I pass away, people will say that Zusha is gone, yet my body, this body that you're seeing right here will still be here. So my question is, if this body is not me, then who am I? Where am I now? And his lesson that he was trying to teach, his students is that you are not a body, you are a soul. And of course, this is one of the most fundamental principles of all of Judaism, something which Kabbalah and Hasidus tries to emphasize. That when we look at ourselves, we see ourselves as a soul and a body. The soul is who we truly are. And when we become too physical, too mundane, too materialistic, too caught up in the happenings of the physical world and forget about our spiritual life, and it doesn't take up much space, we're really missing the point. The physical world is only there for us to be able to achieve great spiritual things, which we can only achieve in this world. And that's the greatness of this world. For example, you can only give tzedakah in this world. You can only put on tefillin in this world. You can only eat kosher in this world. You can only keep Shabbat in this world. But you could study both in this world and the next world. And but we study in this world, you have the real choice. Okay, this is a topic in and of itself, topic that keeps on recurring every time we talk about anything spiritual. We're going to revisit that topic, the topic of what a soul is. And we always have to be reminded of that as often as possible. Does anybody have any questions before we get into discussing the reincarnation as it affects our souls, now that we've discussed the soul? No. Oh.
Miguel,
Yeah. Go ahead.
No?
You got it.
No, I can hear you. I can hear you.
Can you hear me?
Okay, so-
Does the soul age because it's hopping into a body?
Does the soul age? Well, that's a good question. The answer to that is the soul does not age. No, the soul is beyond time. The body is time limited. Souls are not. The soul is experience limited. To experience, it can go to. It goes. The only time that affects the soul is experiences. So yes, it's affected by what happens in the body does affect it, but it does not age because it's not a physical thing. Only physical things age. It lives ad infinitum. It doesn't exist for a limited space. You truly are an infinite being. You will live forever in your soul, and eventually when the resurrection happens back in your body, but that's a discussion for another time. But yes, the answer to that is no, your soul does not age. It's not affected by age, if you know what I'm saying. However, the time that it spends in the soul, in the body, then it is affected by age. In other words, as the body ages and the person goes through experiences, those experiences will impact the soul as it matures, as it goes through those experiences. So it does age, but only while in the body, but not to the point where it becomes too old to live in a body, or it gets old and dies. No,
I do. Does the soul continue to refine itself? Or is it a static?
After this world, after it passes on?
During this world.
So here's the thing, the soul is a perfect being. The soul is a perfect holy being. It comes down here into the world in order to refine it, to refine the body and to refine the animalistic parts of it. So what ends up happening is the soul goes into a body and it gets taken over by the body and the animalistic drives. So the bodily drives. The soul's purpose, therefore, would be to help the individual and to remind the individual of who his true identity is, the soul, this godly soul, which we call it a godly soul, this infinite soul that lives and it's beyond the physical world, and try to remind it to do things that are soul connected and not to be caught up in the physical world. As it does that, it elevates its own existence, because its existence as it was before it was born was a perfect existence. It was connected to spirituality. It didn't do anything wrong. It could not have done anything wrong. It simply lived as a soul in bliss, in spiritual godliness and connection. As it comes into this world, suddenly there's another pull. There's a drive towards physicality, which sometimes feels far stronger than in itself. As the person does acts which are more spiritual, which are more Torah-oriented, or mitzvot-oriented, it slowly and surely starts to reveal more and more of its true identity. And less and less so. It does not get refined. It refines the body, and by that achieves greater heights. In other words, what it does is ultimate. It reveals who its true potential. Before it enters the body, it does not. When you're not faced with challenge, you cannot reveal your potential. Okay? Okay. So now let's get into the discussion of actual reincarnation. So in order to get into a reincarnation, I had to give you the introduction to the souls, but I have to take you another introduction in order to, it's a famous Jewish statement. It's best said in Yiddish, but the statement is, before I say a few words, I will say a few words. And before I say those few words, I'll say another few words. It's the way that the rabbi that is only given 5 minutes to speak gets away with talking for 2 hours, because he only spoke for 5 hours, but he gave an hour and a half introduction, and then another 25-minute introduction post that introduction, and then he spoke only for 5 minutes. Okay. So the next introduction that you have to have is the concept of Gilgulim. So the word that we use in Jewish thought for reincarnation is really Gilgulim. Gilgulim means circles. But what does it mean? You see, when you look at the world, there's different ways of how you could perceive the world. You could perceive the world as it is the way you see it. But you should certainly understand that the way you perceive the world from your vantage point is very, very small. Yeah, broader perspective, you would understand how much greater and bigger the world is, and the tiny human being no longer is even visible. How much more so if you see the whole world through the perspective of the whole universe and through the perspective of all of history. You see, in Judaism, we don't look at anything, just sometimes we do. Each mitzvah is considered its own unique, specific mitzvah. Each deed, each action, each moment is a unique and special moment. But to truly appreciate it, you have to look at it from the broader and bigger perspective. How do you do that? So the Zohar, there's a few books that describe this. One of this is the Zohar. The Zohar is a book of Kabbalah, which is the blueprint of all of these Kabbalistic understanding. Prior to the Zohar, there was a book called Sefer Yetzirah, which is the book of formations, and there was another book known as the book of Gilgulim, Sefer Gilgulim. And over there it tells us the following. It's told that that God created one soul, one godly soul. That soul was given originally to Adam. And that soul had 600,000 parts. That soul eventually went into, after skipping several generations, it went into Yaakov. Yaakov, who became the father of his children. And that soul then split up into 12 parts and eventually into 600,000 parts. And those 600,000 parts were all really part of one original soul made up in the soul of Yaakov, which had originally been in the soul of Adam. And what you saw is one soul divides into 600,000 souls, and each of those 600,000 souls made up a different part of the Jewish mission, of what was going to be the mission of people in this world. So there was going to be 600,000 specific missions. And within 600,000 missions, you probably had another 600,000 missions further. And what was going to happen is, as the Jewish people left Israel, the 600,000 souls that left Israel, men and women, divided each soul into two. Man and his wife were made up of, each two people made up the two halves of the soul. They each had 600,000 parts. Good evening, Noah. Good to see you. Those had 600,000 different parts to the soul, 600,000 unique missions. And the idea was that Hashem has one big broad mission. If you look at it, it's like this. It starts off as a little point, a tiny little dot, and it spreads. There's one goal and one mission. And that's the one mission that stands for all of time. It does not change. However, it divides up into many submissions in order to ultimately come back to achieve the main mission. Within the submissions, it comes down to 600,000 general submissions. Submission sounds, it could have a different word in English, but sub over mission, so you don't get confused. So it goes in like a diamond shape. And then those 600,000 split off into many more. So each soul generally roots itself back to one of the particular 600,000 souls. So this is the way it's explained, particularly in the teachings of the Arizal. Remember, there's one mission made up of many parts, many parts. So ideally, in theory, we could have had the Jewish people that were they were the original Jewish people, you know, who's the real Jews? Well, the real Jews, please stand up. So when we talk about the original Jews were the people that left Egypt. They had one particular mission. They had 600,000 parts. If each of them would have fully fulfilled their mission, they would have gone into Israel and completed their mission. But for some reason, they didn't, and probably because God didn't want that, didn't want it all to end over there. He wanted it to go through much more stages. Each one of them had a general mission. And whatever they did not do got subdivided into another mission. And as the next mission came about, a new soul, so to speak, splintered off or was born into be able to achieve the mission of the original soul. So if you have 600,000 times 6, but that's the man, each soul has a general mission and specific missions in order to do it. It's like, if you know, in order to fulfill a specific mission, there's many points that you have to do, things that you have to go through. So how does this work? There's another concept which you may have heard of, that is a concept used also, once again, by other people, but not correctly, known as Tikkun Olam. Have any of you heard of Tikkun Olam? Tikkun Olam is something that environmentalists like to use, which they like to say is fixing the world. It's a great way of describing that concept, and I'm not saying that environmentalists and fixing the world as it is and taking care of not to destroy the world is a bad thing. Perhaps, actually, it probably has some sources within the Torah itself. However, that certainly is not the original meaning of the definition Tikkun Olam. So what is Tikkun Olam? Tikkun Olam means to rectify the world. But if you take the rest of the word, Tikkun Olam b'malchus shin daled yud, which means in the kingdom of God. What does that mean? That means that, as I mentioned before, we are a soul, and when we are lived just as a soul, we perceive the world as the truth that we perceive the truth as it truly is, that there is a God that created the universe, and that we celebrate and we try to connect to that God. But once you come into your body, you no longer see that truth, and it's very easy to deny the existence of even a creator and to believe that the world came about all by itself. And the job of the soul is to try to allow the body to acknowledge and live up to its true calling, which is the acknowledgement of a higher being. To acknowledge the fact that he was created for a purpose and to try his very best to achieve that purpose. That ultimately is the purpose of the soul. As the soul goes through these stages, the more he rectifies, the more goodness he does to the world, the more he's in tune with who he really is, to his true inner calling. The more he lives up to his truth of his really being, which is a thing that many of us really struggle to do, and we'll talk about that perhaps later on. The more we live with our true selves, we rectify, we end up living up to the mission that we were created for. We fulfill that mission for which we were created. That mission was part of somebody else's mission that lived before us. And that person that lived before us was part of another mission that lived before him. And so on and so forth, from generation to generation, each generation going further and further. They each were a part of a previous person's lifetime. And they all continued that original persons. All the way back to who? Back to the 600,000 Jews that left Egypt. We're all their continuation. And many Jews have lived, continuing to live as the spiritual offshoots of those original souls. And that's known as the concept of Gilgulim. Why? Because those original souls did a certain part of the mission that had been given to them, but not all of it. What they did not do became the mission of a new soul. And that next soul was given a new mission and continued. Or perhaps you could look at it the way I saw a different person writing about it in another example. He says, imagine you are sent on a mission to an island to help the people over there learn language, learn how to write and spell, and learn how to take care of themselves, learn how to make food and educate themselves. And you, from your country where you live, got sent to this country to help these people. And your mission is to be there for 5 years. And after 5 years of being there, you've achieved much, you've helped them a lot. But there's still more to do. There's still many people that still don't know how to read and write. There's still many people that are suffering and still many people that are struggling. But your time now is up. You have to go back home to your family. So then you move on and you go return. Mission, the money, the on. And that person goes and takes your place in that particular world. You go back home with the memories of what you have achieved, and that person will now go and take your place in that particular position with a continued connection and a deep connection to the original person that had done that. However, whilst you are in the physical body, you will not be aware of your previous life, the person who gave birth to your soul, or your previous mission head. Okay? So that's the concept of Gilgulim. The question is asked, what happens to a person that lived in one lifetime and then has to be and then was reincarnated into another body and gets married to somebody else? How does that, what happens over there? Who does, when we have the resurrection, who's that person going to be married? So now we understood. The first person that was resurrected stays with that same old personality, and he gives birth, so to speak, to there's a new offshoot. And that's how we eventually fulfill the ultimate permission of all of creation. Now, is it possible that sometimes one of exactly the same soul will have to re-enter the world for a short amount of time, or maybe even a long time, to relive something, to correct something of their past? It seems to imply from some of the Jewish texts that there are exceptions, that sometimes the very soul that lived will have to re-enter the world, sometimes not even as a human being. Sometimes it will re-enter the world just temporarily as an animal, but not as a comfortable animal. Sometimes that soul can re-enter the world as a plant, but it doesn't live with the thought that I am a plant. It lives with the thought as I am as a person, but there's something that I have to rectify for myself. There's a story about a particular individual that went to a marketplace and bought a horse. And this horse was relatively cheap and slouchy looking. But for some reason, when this particular man came by, the owner of the horse the seller convinced him that this was a great horse. And the man was convinced. He bought the horse, and when he came back home, this horse was the most incredible horse he had ever seen. This horse did not stop working, did everything that this person could imagine. He almost was like a human being, listening to what the person wanted, and would pull plows and all types of things and do incredible work and almost never stop. And this man didn't understand what was going on. And eventually one day he had a dream. And in the dream, an old friend of him that had since passed on came to him and said, "My dear friend, do you remember before I passed away, I owed you money, a large sum of money. I never repaid that to you. And because I never paid back that money, I was given an opportunity to re-enter the world to rectify my mistake. And I re-entered as your horse, as this particular horse. I believe now I've repaid you through the work that I have done as your horse. Will you please forgive me and allow me to go on?" And the person said, "Yes, I forgive you." And the next morning he came and the horse was dead. Now, whether you believe these stories or not is not really that important. But it tells you that there's exceptions to the rule of incarnation. There's also a story of the Baal Shem Tov, of a particular person, a couple that were requesting a blessing for children. And the Baal Shem Tov never gave them the blessing. Until one day, the Baal Shem Tov said, "Okay, I will give you a blessing. You can have a child." They had the child, and they were so overjoyed. And when the child turned 2, they decided to come to the Baal Shem Tov to show the child to the Baal Shem Tov. And they showed the child to the Baal Shem Tov. And on the parents' way back home, the child passed away. And the parents came back to the Baal Shem Tov crying. For many years, we were praying and pleading that we should have a child. We finally have a child. And then just after we come and get the blessing from you, the child passes away. The Baal Shem Tov said, "Let me explain. That child that you had, you were not meant to have children. And therefore, I saw that your mission in life was not to have children. I could not give you a blessing for children. However, you pleaded, and then I found out that there's a soul of a child. There's a child that needs to come back into this world." What had happened? There was a young boy that that had been brought up in a non-Jewish home because his parents had passed away at a young age, had been born up in a young Jewish home. And as a young child, had had all types of non-Jewish, not great Jewish experiences, but he overcame them, and he ate non-kosher, etc. But this young child overcame those negative experiences and ended up becoming a very pious, righteous Jew. And after this child passed away, he had a perfect, so to speak, perfect score in this world, except for the fact that when he was a child, he had eaten all this non-kosher food, etc., stuff that wasn't his fault. He was at no fault of it at all. However, he was given the opportunity, if he wanted to relive those experiences and be able to rectify those experiences and not have to eat the non-kosher. So for some reason, he decided to come back, or he was given the opportunity to come back into this world, and you wanted the blessings, and that's why you got to have that special child. But you should know that that special child was an extremely holy and special neshama. And even though you only got to have that neshama for 2 years, that soul for 2 years, you achieved incredible things that many people would take a full lifetime to achieve, just with having that soul in this world for 2 years. So why am I telling you this? My understanding is that when you look at the text of Kabbalah, it appears that most people do not re-enter the world. They enter the world once. And that's it. They live in eternity. They always are alive, but that existence only enters the soul once, the world once. And then they will live off what they achieved in this world. And that will allow them to ascend in the afterworld further and further. We'll one day have a discussion about the afterworld, not today. And as they go through that journey, some individuals, for some reason, will be required or offered the opportunity to return to the world, whether it's short-lived or for a longer period of time. And that's what will happen to some souls. But that, my understanding is that is the exception. The general rule is we only live once. And here's the most important part of it all. The most important part of this discussion is this. No individual can ever live without a mission. It's not a possibility. By the way, this applies both to Jew and non-Jew. Every individual is given a particular mission of why they were created. Before I go on and discuss this particular point, I want to ask if anybody has any questions that they wanted to ask, because I've been talking for a very long time now. Anybody want to ask any questions? Joe, tell us a joke and wake us up. Come on.
Oh, no. It's a serious talk. I don't need to. I could tell a joke, but I do have a question for you. In discussions outside of this forum, people will sometimes talk about the feeling of déjà vu, that they're in a situation where they feel like they've been there before, or they've had this conversation before, or maybe been in this shiur before. So, and I'm wondering how the concept of déjà vu fits with what you're saying regarding reincarnation. Is everyone else here familiar with, when I use the term déjà vu, what that means?
I think most people are. Yeah, but so my question to you is this. There's two things that happen. There's the one thing, which is sometimes we have the feeling of, oh, I've been here before, or it's familiar. There's something familiar about it. And we call that déjà vu. And then some people will give an explanation to that, and they'll say, oh, maybe it's from a previous lifetime. The answer to that is yes, it could be from a previous lifetime. Sometimes you may have lived here before, but then that not necessarily. It could be one of two reasons. Either it's coming from a previous lifetime experience of your previous existence. In other words, my understanding, and I may be wrong about this, my understanding is that when a person is born to their new mission in their body, they still have the memories. The soul still has the knowledge and the memory of the previous lifetime. That's my understanding. I may be wrong about that. Of course, once they enter the body, they no longer have those memories, but the memories are still there. You know, there's a concept, and I keep on repeating this. There's this crazy concept that everyone thinks is a bunch of hogwash, but it's a fundamental concept when you understand it. There's a concept of before you're born, you learn the whole Torah. Right? Have you heard that? That your soul, while in your mother's womb, learns the whole Torah. Everything it has to know. The question is, I don't remember any of it. And I struggle with learning even a little piece of Gemara. You can tell me I learned it all, and the answer is this. The whole idea is that God wants to give you all the abilities that you're going to have. But when you relearn it, when you study Torah, you should have a different feeling to when you study anything else. When you study Torah, there should be a sense of deja vu happening. You should be like, aha, this makes sense. This fits with me. If we're in tune with who we really are, it should almost feel as though every time we study Torah, it's just tapping into some forgotten memory that we would never have discovered ourselves had we not relearned it. But when we do relearn it, it all makes sense. That's the idea of studying the Torah before you're born, to tell you that you have it all inside of you. You just have to reveal it. Okay? So we forget things from our past life because we cannot know of things that are totally spiritual. That's an impossibility. But it's all there. It's all still there, part of your soul. And the same thing I would understand, and this, as I said, this is not 100% sure about, but this is my understanding, would be of previous lifetimes. Previous lifetimes that your soul came from, but not that you lived. You may have the memories of others, part of you, but not that you're going to, you are only you. As I mentioned, there could be exceptions to that, and sometimes people will have to come back into the world 1 or 2 times for particular unique missions, but certainly not ongoing. And that, even it's understand, is not the way it always is. Now, we understand. Sorry, does anybody have any other questions before I continue with this?
Sorry, Rabbi, can I just ask further on that?
Yeah.
In the commentaries and so on, are there any records, I suppose, of the exceptions where, you know, holy people have vividly recalled either a previous existence, so previous lifetime for the same soul, or maybe even looked ahead to the next reincarnation of their soul and vividly again recalled that?
Okay, so the answer to your question, as far as I know, is this. Whether or not people have spoken about the future, I'm certain that they haven't. As in, I don't know, sorry, I shouldn't say certain, I should just say I've never seen anything like it, a person talking about, well, my next lifetime, because you don't know about your next lifetime, it hasn't happened, and your next lifetime is almost determined based on what you will achieve. So whatever you don't achieve in your lifetime is what's going to make a big difference to your future lifetime. But on the question of the past, yes, there, first of all, in the book of Gilgulim, it tells us about people, famous people that were reincarnations of the past. One of them, I'm trying to remember, I actually forgot to look this up before the share, but it's got some fascinating examples. One of them famously was Tzipporah, the wife of Moshe. was supposed to sing songs at the spilling of the sea, but for whatever reason, God ordained that she wasn't there. And therefore she reincarnated to a certain point. Her soul was reborn in the body of Devorah, the prophetess. Okay, so that's one example. Now, once again, was it the actual soul of Tzipporah, or was it an offshoot of the soul of Tzipporah? We're told that Mordechai was an offshoot. Oh, I'm trying to remember who all these people were. But famously, almost all the people, Esther, I think, came from Sarah. We're told that the soul of Esther in the book of Gilgulim, it tells us that the soul of Esther, I think, was connected to the soul of Sarah, the wife of Abraham. The soul of Shmuel to somebody else. Anyway, I should have looked this up because it's actually quite interesting. And actually what it does is it shows you the connection between the two life stories, and you'll see how the one individual corrected what the previous person left out. Do you understand what I'm saying? What the Sefer Gilgulim tells us, it shows us the one person's lifetime. And now I'm kind of shooting myself in the foot that I didn't actually look this part up, because it's a fascinating point where it shows you that there was something that a person lived, another person lives later on, lives a very similar type of life to that individual, yet changes one little part of it, which ends up being the tikkun of the previous person's lifetime. That previous person could have lived many hundreds of years earlier, but still is that continuation. And once again, it's not the exact same soul, but it's the offshoot of the soul. It's that connection to that soul. Okay. I'm going to go further because I want to talk about one final point, but it's really the most important point, and that is this. We all are created with a particular mission, and that mission, as I mentioned at the beginning, relates back to the original plan and mission of all of creation. That's the mission of why we're here. That mission will also be directly connected to our predecessor, our soul pre-bearer, whatever you want to call it, the individual that was first connected to our soul. It will then spin off and create our new mission, and usually our mission will be that which the person didn't do. However, our missions as we live our life can adapt and change as we change them. And we'll have different things happening to us that kind of pop into us. And as we live our lives, the more true we are to our mission, the more we will be given to do, to achieve within our lifetime. The less we are true to our original mission, the less we will be given to do. And I suppose there would be less required of us. Sometimes people, so here's the thing, if people generally live a generally good lifetime, where my understanding, this is the way I understood it, when we achieve most of what or a lot of what we're supposed to set out to do and then we have a positive impact in the world, what's left over gets born into a new soul, and the new soul has that mission to continue the path of what that person left off, to finish off what has to be done in that particular path. And that can take hundreds of generations. We're all, as I said, offshoots, and we have many, many different missions. But if a person has done the opposite, has reversed, has lived a negative life, where they have done more damage than good within their lifetime, which is rare. Most people do more good than damage, bring the world closer to its achievement, to its fulfillment. But some people bring the world further from where they're supposed to be going. Then the world slowly, those people that do worse may have to come back into the world. Or sometimes they will be given, a soul will be born from them in order to simply correct what they had done wrong, to get them back on path. Now, there's another element to this mission. It's understood that the mission is given to a soul, but the soul is made up of two parts. There's the male part and the female part. And in the right circumstances, those two people are doing a parallel mission. There's two parts of the mission. There's the female element of the mission, and there's the male element of the mission. And that applies in every circumstance, as far as we understand most circumstances, unless the person for some reason doesn't have it. In order for those people to then go and find each other and match up, as we know, many people struggle to find their spouses. And some people, after they find their spouses, they still struggle. And all people struggle once they found their spouses. But that's the way life is. If they are matched up to the sense that they are still in tune with each other and their mission, then it's understood that they'll be easier to find each other. And if they're different paths and gone in different directions in their lifetimes, they may struggle to find each other and can end up with other people that are more fit for them. And that will become their new soul partner. So there's always this kind of soul balance. Ideally, you're with the original partner, the original person who you belong, but sometimes that person can get lost. And the reason is because one of you have gone off trail, usually. But that doesn't mean that you're lost for good. You can find somebody else that could be fit for you where you are as you're going along. So are you with your original other part of your soul? I don't know. I suppose in some cases, yes. In some cases, no. But those are one connection. We're told that the reason why men do certain mitzvahs and women do certain mitzvahs and men have particular is because it's one soul. When the man does the mitzvahs, he puts on tefillin, he's also putting on tefillin for his wife. And that applies even before they get married. They're doing it for the other person. So the question is, how do you find your mission? How do you know why you were created? What is the mission that you were put in this world to do? So there's two answers to that. The answer number one is, I don't know, and neither may you know originally. But the answer to it on the deeper level is, the truth is you can find out. You can find out your mission. I didn't bring it here, but there's a few videos of people walking past the Rebbe and saying, Rebbe, what's my mission in life? And in some of those cases, sometimes the people never ask the Rebbe that directly. Sometimes the Rebbe asks, should I do this particular role in the life? And the Rebbe will say yes. Or the Rebbe will say, no, that's not what you should be doing. The circumstances for you are not correct. Or sometimes the Rebbe will say, this is something that you have to choose by yourself. I cannot guide you in this. But when a person comes to the Rebbe and directly asks him, Rebbe, what is my mission in life? There's a few videos of people actually doing that. Almost always, and on many of those circumstances, the Rebbe would say, your mission as a Jewish person is to fulfill the Torah and mitzvot. So, Rebbe, that's boring. Everyone before me had that mitzvah, and everyone after me is going to have. What's my unique mission? No, that's your mission. And here's how I understand it. And once again, I may be wrong, but this is what I understand it. As a Jewish person, in order for us to fulfill our unique mission, we have to slowly reveal our godly soul. Because once we tap into our godly soul, we will have a much easier time finding out what our true mission is. And the more good we do, the closer we come to being able to be aligned with our mission. So the Rebbe, from my understanding, was saying to him, if you want to know what your mission is, you have to be aligned with your godly soul, because that's the soul that is going to tell you your mission. And if you're not aligned with it, you're going to struggle to find it. But if you found something that you're doing, over there is your mission. The Torah tells us this. When you find yourself in a particular situation, it's one of the teachings of the Rebbe, but it's based on a fundamental teaching within Torah, that the Rebbe made a big emphasis on it. When you find yourself in a particular circumstances, whether you're stuck on a plane in the middle of Taiwan and your plane is delayed, or you're stuck in traffic, or you have a particular illness that is making you stay home or not well, that's where your mission is. Your mission is in the circumstances that you find yourself. You have the choice how you're going to bring God into that particular element. That's your mission at that moment. And that could be an ever-changing at every moment in your life. It's constantly changing. And every mission, it's your opportunity that you have a unique opportunity right now, do something good, something holy, reveal godliness in that particular time. That's the specific timely mission. Then you have a general mission. And Hasidic works and both the works, other works like Chobot HaLevavot and tells us, Shara Bitachon tells us, if a person wants to achieve their mission, they should figure out where is their biggest passion? Where are they most excited? Where do they most enjoy doing? And when you figure those things out, you should see, hold on a second. There could be, let's say, I love doing business. Business is an incredible opportunity to do tremendous good. Jealous they were of business people, because a business person had opportunity to give tzedakah and support so many Jewish causes, but also in their business interactions, they had on a day-to-day business opportunity to stop their work and say, God, thank you for providing. Thank you for giving me that deal. Thank you for making this happen. And it doesn't mean only specific business people, but it's anybody who's involved in day-to-day lifestyle, whether you're a teacher or a business person, a doctor, a lawyer, accountant. Every single particular job gives you, if you find yourself that you have a particular skill, a particular passion, don't use it for the passion as the way every person, Gentile out there might use it. Use it in a Jewish way to benefit the world, to benefit a Jewish community, to help bring out godliness within the world. That's where your mission is. So what are you good at? What are your strengths? What do you most enjoy doing? And if you enjoy doing something, but you're not using it for holy purposes, how could you try to use your passions and excitements for holy purposes? Some people will say that it's where you most struggle. That's where your mission is. And there's truth to that, but sometimes it's not only where you most struggle, sometimes it's where you most where you most succeed. That could be particularly where your mission is. Okay? So, in short, does Judaism believe in reincarnation? The simple, if I would ask Sam to summarize this, if you did a job as good as you did last week, Sam, the answer would be Judaism does not believe in reincarnation, at least not the way most people perceive it. However, it certainly believes that our mission is an ongoing mission. We are standing on the shoulders of giants, of those that came before us. We are not just here just because we were born to these parents at this particular time, and we happen to live in the 21st century. It happens to be that we get to talk on Zoom and see what's happening in Ukraine. It's not just. It happens to be that we have the unique skills, and we're the particular person that God chose to continue the particular mission of whichever soul is rooted in those 600,000 souls that were originally started. And once we fulfill our mission, then we will fulfill the particular mission while we were born, but we will also ultimately fulfill the ultimate mission of all of creation. When that happens, we will enter a new era, where the mission will change. It will no longer be a mission of struggle and darkness to reveal the light within the struggle. The mission will adapt to a mission of experiencing the light. May it be speedily in our days. Okay, so that's my say for the night. So thank you everyone for joining. If anybody wants to stay on and ask questions, you're welcome to, but the shir is formally over. But anybody that wants to ask a question is welcome to. Have a good night. Thank you so much for joining.
Thank you very much. Laila Tov.
Laila Tov.
Good night.
Thank you. Thank you.
Rabbi, can I ask
night.
a quick question?
Sure.
Okay. In the davening, there's a phrase, Lo alecha hamlacha ligmor. How do we fit that in with what you've just talked about?
Well, I've already told you but what's the next word? What's the words before that?
Before?
Hayom
after.
katzar v'amlacha meruba. The day is short, there's much, but the work is much.
Yeah.
Yes?
Yep.
And then it says, and the workers are lazy. And the balabai and the master is calling them to do the work. And then the next one says, Hayom katzar, Hayom katzar, the day is short, but there's much work. So you may think that, okay, the life is short. So what are you thinking? But there's not enough time. Because there's so much work to be done and there's not enough time. It tells us that you cannot achieve everything. So what is it? What's the next one? You're not a free man to nullify yourself from the work. In other words, not to do the work. Yes, there's too much work for you to do. And as much work as you do, you will always have more work to do. That's a fact, right? Get a lot of work done. What happens, the more work you do, the more work is given. And that's happened in your spiritual life as well. The more work you're given, the more God will give you to do. Yes, you will get the beautiful benefits and reward, knowing that you've done and achieved much in your work to do. You do whatever you can do, and whatever you don't do will be given over to the next individual to continue.
The next individual, or maybe your own soul reincarnated.
Well, your sorry, I jumped off for a second. I don't know what happened over there. Did you hear what I said? Okay. The next individual is your own soul. That's what I mean. The next individual is the reincarnation as your soul. You will have done what you did, and you will now live on in the world of souls, which what the world of souls is, we'll discuss another time. You will continue whatever you've achieved. You will live a life based on those achievements of spirituality, and you will get the rewards for your own lifetime. And what you ever didn't achieve will go on to the next person. And that person will have a lot of work, and he won't be able to achieve the whole work, the whole job, or he'll achieve as much if he manages to finish the ultimate job of that particular soul. Then perhaps Mashiach will come. And that's why the Rambam tells us, don't take for granted even a single deed, because there's a certain job to be done. Once every single deed that is required to be done is achieved, then the scales tip and Mashiach comes, so to speak. So your last deed could be the one that will ultimately tip the scale. That's the point. Is that clear to you?
As clear as it can get.
Okay. All right. Any other questions? No? Okay. All right. Thank you so much, everybody. Have a wonderful night. Good night.
Good night.
Thank you. Good night.
Thank you for joining.